What's up, mobile gamers? It's JonsOrGigs back with part 2 of my composition slash switching guides for you guys. My video's going over it. We already did the composition video, so we covered all that. But now we're actually going to be talking about switching. A lot of people wanted to know about switching, and I did team composition first because I think switching really depends a lot on team composition. You know what I mean? If you have a good team comp, you don't have to switch. If you have a good team comp except for one role, you know, you're missing a healer or you're missing that Vanguard, that's when you're going to kind of struggle. You know what I mean? You're going to be like, oh, we don't have a Vanguard, I got to switch to a Vanguard. So that's obviously going to be the most common form of switching, is just switching in general to cover that role, to have a better team comp. So that switching's pretty easy to kind of explain for you. I'm actually going to purposefully pick, in this ranked game here, somebody who's not really picked a lot, somebody who isn't going to be influential to the team comp. You can see right away we've got double healer. Oh, well, we've got healer, 2 damage dealers, a tank, right, the Vanguard, the Jabali, and then I am the flanker. So we have a pretty good team comp right off the gate, which is really, I'm thankful for that, because it seems like most of my videos, there's not even a tank or a healer. It's all damage. You see, they don't even have a tank. They basically have one flanker, and I actually didn't see their whole team comp to see. Yeah, so they got 1 healer, 1 flanker, and 3 damage dealers. So right out the gate, what you're going to see is you have to play for your role, and switching will depend entirely on the team composition first of your team, and then afterwards, when you're depending on like what you're thinking about switching, is you're going to look at your team composition, right? We're actually going to run away because I'm trying to talk here. We'll lead her over to our tank, help him out against the chemist. And then is that, where's the Hualing? So the Hualing and the Gloria is who I'm primarily focusing on here, and that is because of my role. Now, if we get them to switch off of the Gloria, that's pretty awesome. I don't think that's going to happen. See if we can't help out with the Aletta a little bit. And then there's the Hualing. Oh, okay, she actually died, which is good for us because, oh wow, I don't know how he died. That was pretty crazy. Let's see, do they have a Gatlin? Who is that that's doing all the damage? Right, so when you're hero switching, we're basically gonna throw this game, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but we do have to talk about this hero switching thing for you guys. And apparently we just died from the Hualing. So you can see that right now we don't have to hero switch because their team comp's not very good and ours is really good. Our team comp's very nice. And you have to determine who's the best player for you to focus when you're switching. And that could be legitimately who's the best player on the team. I think the Hualing, yep, there she is. Who's the best player for you to focus on the enemy team. And I might actually, yeah. So we're actually going to switch because of how many damage dealers they have. And that is because I've determined who the best player to focus is. So their best player, right now, we're going to, let's see, what's our damage like? Yeah, we're probably going to switch real quick.
Just kidding.
And we're actually going to go with Skady because she's kind of a hybrid. So you have to determine what is the role you're trying to fill when you're switching. Are you switching just to go after one person, then you don't really have to focus on it too much? And then you have your other one where it's like, are you switching where you kind of want to switch to a different hero, but you also want to make sure you're useful in the team comp here? So we're actually going to get the Hualing got us. So what I was trying to talk about, right, is your criteria. How do you determine who their best player is or who you should focus on when you're switching here? And mostly you kind of do that by looking at the kill feed or seeing who is beating you. And right now we don't really have anybody that's beating us, so the Hualing's pretty good, but we also chose Skady so that we could pick a hero that will actually counter that Aletta pick, right? And so it's nice that I got the mark, but that's not my primary focus here. I want, yeah, I can't hit her. Yeah, she's invisible, so she basically gets a free headshot on us. But you also have to factor in, right, who you should focus, who's their best player, and right now they don't really have a best player. I'd say it's kind of the Hua Ling, but I went with Skady because not only do I need that flip to get away from the Hua Ling, but I also have that web, right? And that web can be used to, let's see, they have an Osos now, right? So this is kind of what I was talking about. Right now they switched to the Osos, right? They saw how high our damage was, and they decided the best way to counter that is going to be with the Osos. And, oh, I thought we killed the Hua Ling. That's crazy. I must have killed somebody else with my ultimate. I mean, I honestly wasn't paying attention. Obviously, you also factor in your hero skill, like who's a good hero? Who's a meta pick? We already talked about meta in the team composition. If you've got a bunch of meta heroes like we do right now, then, you know, the Gloria play might make sense to you, you know? Maybe it doesn't make sense later on, but right now it does. We're kind of just trying to be that DPS support right now, so that we can get this overtime win, and then we'll kind of talk about it a little bit later, right? So we got that win, and you can see in that game we decided, okay, we're gonna switch and we're gonna focus on the Hua Ling, and then also because we picked Skady, we focus on the Aletta as well. So you really have to think about what hero is the best to switch from here, and we're actually going to go ahead and look at some of the rosters from previous games that I have played, and we're just going to kind of talk about how the match progressed and stuff like that, so it's a little easier for you guys to follow. I did want to get some gameplay in here and there because I think it's very important to actually see what I'm talking about. So you have this game in the back of your minds, right? You have who's their best player. Obviously, you look at the kill feed, it's the Hua Ling. Just like I said, the Aletta was a little bit annoying, but the Hua Ling was the one who was doing the most damage on the enemy team, and that's who I focused. That's who I primarily targeted, and that's why I picked a flanker in the first part of the match, is because I wanted to be able to teleport to their back line with a Gloria, and then you see they had a Hunter at one point, they had the Mark, so I really wasn't hindering my team by switching heroes there. So once you have a Vanguard and a healer, honestly you can go with whatever you want. Vanguard and healer is what you need, and then you can switch. If you're on a team and they're very, very bad, they're just terrible, then use whoever you have fun with. They don't have to be a meta pick. Just pick whoever you're going to have fun with if your team's going to lose. A lot of the times you can tell because that best player, that Hua Ling that has 11 kills, instead of 11, you know, you end the match and she has 25 to 30 kills, and you know that you're toast. You know what I mean? You know you're going to lose because they steamroll your team, and you don't even, it's 5 minutes into the game, and you haven't even gotten the payload out of its little point when you capture that first point on the new map, right? So you can see how you decide who is the one determining factor, right, for who you're going to counter, who you're going to base your criteria off of. And a lot of the time that comes down to opponent's skill. Obviously, you have basic composition style switching where they don't have a tank and we don't have a tank, so you pick a tank. That's a very basic switch. They don't have a healer, we need a healer. They have a healer and a tank, and we already have a tank, but nobody's playing healer. You pick that healer. It's about filling that role first and foremost, and then if you're losing or if your whole team's good. Let's say you can see my team here. Team's pretty good. I could honestly have played anybody I wanted to. We probably still would have won that game just because of how good the Jabali was and how good the Sindri was. So it really comes down to that as well. So you can see the other thing that I say you should always keep in your mind is the opponent's skill level as well. We talked about this for the most part, but if you have a Hua Ling and your team's doing decent, or maybe they're losing, you pick just to counter that Hua Ling. If you're going to hero switch in a way that counters the opponent, you go all in. And instead of doing that, I just went with Diggy and just kind of play it around. But if I was completely switching based on who their best player is, that is going to be the Hualing. I pick a flanker, and all I do the entire match is I fight that Hualing right here, that Sol Goodman, and I kill her and kill her and kill her every time she spawns until she either A, switches off that Hualing, or B, because I'm doing good enough at keeping her at bay, it gives us an advantage in manpower and damage ability. So you can see that in the way that we played that game right there. Based on the opponent's skill, we decided, oh, you know, we're actually going to go after the Hualing or go after their Skady or something like that. And that's why you can sometimes focus, right, on the enemy that has the most skill. And a lot of time that's what comes next after that composition, right? I mentioned in the composition video, you have that heavy damage composition, that skill difference, right? Where the enemy team is just steamrolling you. Maybe you got somebody who's really good like Myron or Atomic on the enemy team and they're playing Gatlin. So you switch to Shell only to counter that Gatlin so they can either switch off or you can get that kill and change the tide of the match. So you have to think about who their best player is. You have to think about who you should focus, who's the most skilled, right? And who their best player is in terms of the pick as well. Because their best player, right, you can see here, this is just a bot game I did right before this so you could see the composition. They have all damage heroes. All these heroes are damage. They have one tank. I don't really need to even counter that. So I just play my Labula and it doesn't matter. And that's one of the things I like about these matches where you can see different team comps and stuff like that. And right here, you can see that these are bots. And you think to yourself, who's the best bot? And that's usually Hunter and Gatlin. So you can see that if somebody were to, you know, you go back to our match right here, if somebody were to pick that Jabali, let's say I'm versing my team, pretend that all these names are different, right? Pretend that that's just the Jabali right here, and you see him on the enemy team. And even if the Osos is really good, you know that they're pushing the payload and no one's killing the Jabali. So you switch to a hero that you know you can kill the Jabali with. Maybe that's Gatlin. Maybe you recognize their Osos is not really a good backline. He's just doing good headshots, but he's not really watching the payload. And so you decide, I'm going to switch to Shell, and I'm going to go to the payload and slow it down and get that Jabali. So you also can see who their best player is, not based off of skill, but based off of who they're actually playing, who the meta is in the game. You know what I mean? If they're using a meta hero, they might be your first automatic counter. You might see, oh, look at that Jabali on the enemy team. Look at that Fade on the enemy team. You're instantly thinking, I have to counter him so they switch off. I have to counter him so that my team can take the point. So you also have that to consider when you are talking about switching your heroes. The next thing I'm going to talk about kind of goes into the roles of heroes, right? And that is the teammate behavior. So one of the matches that I had over here, I had a lot of matches. Yeah, I can't go down anymore. Is this that bot one? It is, right? So you can see right here your teammate behavior, right? Your role. You have this guy right here is actually one of my friends. He was just kind of AFK most of that match. You can see that he's 0 and 0. He's playing a flanker, right? If he's actually behaving that way and he's playing, you know, a Gloria, right, with the bot right here, Itzel, right? He's got 0 kills as Gloria, 0 kills as Hualing. That shows you that you at some point needed to switch to cover that role. If they are on your team, you have to think, how are they actually playing that hero? He's playing a flanker. He's got 10 assists. That's pretty decent. He doesn't necessarily need to get kills against a bot team. That's something that you can see in the game where you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes sense to how they were able to win. We'll actually look here at this defeat. Is this the right one? Yeah. No, that's not the right one. Sorry, you guys. Hang on. All right. This one is actually the right one. You can see This Go-Go is 30. And because I had a challenge with Labula and it wasn't a ranked match, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna throw the match. I don't really care. I was just trying to get some time in, and it was a long payload escort match, and I was playing Labula. But if I was to be switching and I look at the roles that they're playing, their Gatlin was MVP. She got 30 kills. So at some point, you see that we've got over here, we've got somebody who was playing Diggy and Gloria. She should have been countering the Gatlin, and she wasn't. Then you go over here, somebody was playing Shell for the majority of the match, and then it was Christina for a little bit, and then mostly Gatlin. So Shell and Gatlin against another Gatlin. And you can see that the teammates that we have, they may be playing the correct role, but they are not actually playing the hero. The Shell and the Diggy were mostly sitting on the payload, just dying over and over again, where, you know, you have somebody like the Fade right there. The Fade was doing his job, sitting on that payload, getting, I mean, yeah, he died 13 times, but 7 kills against a team that has a Gatlin with 30 is pretty good. So sitting on that payload is exactly what you want to do. That's playing to your role. But when I saw the Diggy and the Shell struggling, I should have switched to Aletta and focused on their Gatlin, because my teammates' behavior was not indicative of their role. It wasn't indicative of their skill. They were picking the wrong hero. If you have a Gloria with 0 kills, I always go back to that because she's the best hero. How do you have no kills as Gloria? I want to say I have a match in here where the Gloria got 0 kills. I promise you, it's in here somewhere. Ignore some of these stats. Most of these are just bot games, because I was just really bored, and I was like, you know what, meh. I can't seem to find it. Maybe it was before all these games right here. Was it this one? Oh, that's the one we were talking about. We'll just keep it on this one, actually. So you have the Chemist right here on the enemy team. Did pretty decent. 13 assists, 11 downs, 2 kills. You don't really want kills as a Chemist. You can see she actually stayed on the Chemist and did not switch off because she was confident in her abilities of her teammates. You can see they didn't even use a tank at all. They completely skill diffed us. We were just a worse team, and because I had a challenge as Labula, I wasn't able to switch off, and that, honestly, it's my fault that we lost. I could have easily switched over to like Aletta or Gloria or something like that, and we would have won. I actually didn't even... I switched over to Jabali after I got kicked from the game. I switched to Jabali when I got back in, and they had already won, so unfortunately I didn't get to change the game as Jabali, because that would have been a good hero switch. And you can see that it has a lot to do with the criteria that you're focusing on. If you're focusing on the team comp, then your switch is going to be more basic. If you're focusing on a certain enemy on the enemy team, that switch is going to require a lot more thought. You can see, obviously the Gatlin's doing really, really good, but you can see at some point there was a Judix that switched over to a Yaw and a Diggy. She was doing really good at harassing our flankers. She was doing really good at taking those kills and capitalizing on that, so the Gatlin could pick up those kills easy and just take a little bit of damage, and boom, she's got the kill. So I kind of want to focus on that, obviously, because those roles and your teammates' behavior, all of that is what you consider when you're switching. Overall, I think switching is good in the long-term health of the game. I know, myself included, a lot of content creators and people that were playing the game were hesitant to have switching in, because then it's just like counter after counter after counter. So if I would have switched to, let's say, a flanker to stop the Gatlin, and then she switches to a tank, and then I switch to Gatlin, and then she switches to a flanker, and so I switch off Gatlin and switch to a damage dealer, and then she switches off of her flanker, right, to go back to Gatlin, and then it's just a cycle of us switching and switching and switching. And that usually happens because the two best players are interlocked. She's their best player. I'm our best player, and we just switch in order to counter each other over and over and over again. And sometimes that's good. I'm actually gonna take a drink of water real quick. But sometimes it's good. Sometimes switching is nice. Sometimes playing to counter just one person can actually win you the game. I know there's been a lot of matches where if we don't have a Gloria on our team and they have a Gatlin or they have two tanks, I'll switch to Gloria and get 25 kills and win the game for us. And that's how powerful switching can become. We're also going to talk about how to switch within your roles, because I mentioned your criteria when switching based on what the enemy is doing, what your teammates are doing. You also have that criteria of why are you switching? Who are you going to switch to? You can see I switched to Skady, right, in the last match. And I talked about during the match why I switched to her. We already had, I don't even remember who we had. We had a Mark or something, I think. I switched to Skady because she has that flip that allows me to be partially a flanker to deal with that Hua Ling, but she has her web, right? You go to her ability info, she's got dub stop, right? The first active. That is to counter the Aletta, so I picked a hero who has multiple counters to the enemy's heroes. If I would have picked Osas, the Aletta would have eaten me alive. If I would have picked up somebody like Judix, I probably would have got out-sniped by the Hua Ling, something like that, something like Christina. I wouldn't have had the ability to deal with the Hua Ling, but I would have been able to get the Aletta. So you also have to understand who you're picking, right? And why you're picking them. I would recommend that you go into the firing range and try these heroes out. Use the free trials that they give you for each week. You have one of every role. Definitely take advantage of that and play all the heroes. Even if I might not like Judix, I play her. She's at 594 for a reason. She's not a meta pick, and all these heroes are better than her in my opinion. And she is someone I'm just not personally... I don't have fun when I play her, even though I'm really good with her. You guys know I was top 100 at one point with Judix when she first came out, and then obviously later on I'm really good when I play her. But I don't pick her because a lot of these heroes have ways of countering the enemy that I would prefer. So when you're looking at these heroes, you focus on their role. What is the purpose of picking that hero? You might go, okay, we need a tank. I have to switch to a tank. Who do you switch to? Are you going to switch to Zero Kelvin? Obviously not. That's not a good idea. But you have to think about who you're picking. You can't just pick a healer. If you don't have access to Neon, right? Pretend she's not there. We're gonna get rid of her. And you're thinking Sindri, Iris, Labula, Chemist. Obviously I'm a healer main, right? Sindri, she falls off in that diamond level of play. She's a very good pick early on. And if you're like, oh, we need a healer, they're tearing up our tanks so fast. They're Gloria. They're countering her with the flanker on our team, but she's still doing enough damage to beat our tank. I have to switch to a healer, right? You'll see me do that a lot. But Sindri's really good in those lower ranks, but if you're a diamond player and you're used to switching to Sindri, they will eat you alive if you switch to Sindri. You're better off picking Labula, because if you look, he has the Eternal Generator that basically gives you invincibility. So it's that's an obvious one, right? I'm going with very, very, very obvious examples, right? Neon is very single target based. Chemist and Labula and Sindri, all these other healers are multi-target based, and Labula does a lot of damage. And sometimes you need to trade off. Maybe you don't need a healer all the time, but if they focus your tank, he gets killed really fast. So you pick Labula so you can heal up the tank, and then maybe they kill off the damage, and then you can help get damage onto the enemy tank or something like that. You have to really think about who you're picking. You have to also think about your skill level with certain heroes. If your team is not playing the hero to the role that they're supposed to be, you have to pick somebody you're good with. I'm not going to pick Kazuma if the other team is really good and my team is an Aletta and a Ya and they're not doing their job. I'm going to pick whichever hero I'm the most comfortable with, who I know the kit of, and who can fill that role. Obviously, if you're facing a Gatlin, you have multiple ways to counter that Gatlin just within this roster. You have Shell, who can teleport and close the gap. You have Ya, who can put her shield up, and the Gatlin will shoot at it, and the shield is up, and it bounces the damage back, right? And it kills her. So that's a good pick. You have Diggy, who can teleport behind her, kill her with the shotgun. It's really a complicated way of looking at things, and I know for a lot of you, it's kind of difficult. I hope that this has helped, and I'm thinking that this is a decent part to end it. Let me know, obviously, in the comments if you guys want to know anything more. And if... sorry, voice is going away there. But those are the main things you want to think about. Let me know if you have any questions. Obviously, you can refer to the team composition role if you have questions on that part of hero switching. You also have... maybe you're just switching and switching and switching, and the team is just better. Sometimes you have to accept that. The other team's just better than you. You're switching to counter the Gatlin, but she's already ready for your counters. She's already out of her Uber Charge mode and ready with her ultimate. Those are the things you have to consider when you're thinking about hero switching. So just to kind of recap, you've got who's the best player to focus, right? Whether it's skill or who they're playing. You have the criteria we talked about on how to determine who you focus, who you switch for, why you should switch to or from a certain hero, and why you should switch to counter certain heroes as well, whether they're skilled or not. We talked about the usefulness of who you're switching to. Is it useful for the team comp or for you? Is it useful for the certain situation or the mode? That always comes into play. And then you also, you have the last two things, which is teammate behavior, where if they're playing the hero how they need to be played, and who the team is playing, who they're picking, and how they're playing the certain heroes that they have. And then you also have the individual characteristics, right? The who do you pick, which role, and why, and inside that role, what are you picking them for, and can they do the job you're picking them for? If I want to hold the point for a little bit, but I also know I want to flank and get the Gatlin, I might pick Johnny to hold the point for a little bit, invisibility, and then jump over and try to kill the Gatlin. I might go full Diggy like I did in that first match and try to kill the Hua Ling, and really focus on a certain person on the enemy team. So I hope this is helpful for you guys, right? We'll end it with the poster child here. Right, there's a reason, right? Aletta is a flanker. She's not really necessary to the team comp, but you still see her in high level play. And that's because she's a good person to switch to if you're good with her. So overall, the game itself is about fun, but that is hero switching in a nutshell. I hope it was a good video for you guys. Hope you learned a lot. Like I said, leave a comment, definitely sub, because we got more content coming. But those comments, I will be responding to all of them. Anything you guys want to know, I will respond to. Is it better to switch for composition or for fun? If you have a good team, you can switch just for fun and just play whoever you want to. And if you're in ranked, you're going to want a tank, so you have to switch for composition. So there's a lot to think about that goes into it, and I hope that this has opened your eyes to it and helped you learn about it to decide if hero switching is something for you. Obviously, you have your diehard players, like where I was in that Labula, that match with Labula, and I just didn't switch off because I had a challenge. And you don't even need hero switching. So that's the video for you guys. We'll see ya in the next one.